food feels harder to manage during hormonal shifts, regardless of where you are in your life cycle. It usually shows up like this, okay? You don't get a gentle, I'm hungry anymore, right? You don't really get like, whether it's, and I know you felt this when it's a couple days before your period or during this time, you don't get a just like, oh, I'm hungry. It's almost like you go from A to Z. You go from 0 to 60. You go from fine to I'm really not fine really quickly. Hello and welcome to another new episode of Emotional Eating Unwrapped. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, and I want to be clear about what we're talking today because this episode is about why food suddenly feels harder to manage before your period, during perimenopause, or after menopause, even when you haven't changed anything, right? So we're going to be talking about hormonal shifts and how that affects food. And I'm going to tell you that it has nothing to do with whether or not you stopped caring. It's not because you lost control. But what it is about your body has changed the rules of how it behaves. Okay? And the women that I know, myself included, as I'm definitely in a transition of myself, right? Being 45 years old, I definitely am feeling the impacts of perimenopause. Most women don't wake up one day thinking, I've lost control with food. That's not typically, what women are thinking. It's more subtle than that. It's more like something that you start noticing. You start noticing that you're thinking about food more. You start noticing that hunger feels more intense than it used to, or comes on kind of out of nowhere. Cravings might feel more, more urgent, more sharp. And then the things that worked in the past, or the things that work when you're not on your period or the week before your period or something like that, or you're not having hormonal fluctuations, things that used to work to help you, feel more in control and feel more like yourself, they're just not working anymore. And like I said, maybe you're at a place in your life where this type of experience and these types of feelings happen a few days before your period. Maybe you're in a place where it starts earlier or it's totally unpredictable, like me, right? Maybe it lasts longer. Who knows? But the core question, I think, that is the real struggle, the internal struggle, is why does eating feel so much harder now? Why does food feel like it has a megaphone and a microphone in my brain? So today I want to walk you through why, like I said before, why hormonal shifts make food feel louder in your mind, and why it feels more scary, and why your relationship with food might feel harder to trust. And I also want to validate for you that none of those feelings that we're going to talk about mean that you're out of control. Okay, what it means is that your body is just asking for support, for care, for listening, for understanding in a new way. That's what we're going to talk about today. But first, if you are new to me, my name is Alana Kessler, and I'm a registered dietitian. I've been in the health and the wellness space for 20 plus years. I've worked clinically. I've worked in functional nutrition. I have huge expertise in mindfulness and nervous system. I've done so many things, but my passion for the last decade plus is helping people, all people, really find love with their body, lose weight, reconnect with themselves, and overcome any kind of emotional or addictive patterns and relationship and behaviors with food so you can live your best life. That is what we're here for. That's what we want to do. We want to be able to bring our best into the world. So if you are new here, welcome. If you have been a longer time listener, thank you so much for continuing to show up for yourself and for the podcast. And so let's dive right in today. All right. So like I said, feeling out of control with food during hormonal changes does not mean that you are going backwards. It doesn't mean that you've undone any of your progress. If you're on a weight loss journey or a fitness journey or any kind of body image journey. And it doesn't mean that you all of a sudden can't trust yourself. It just means that the old paradigm, the old way that you've been doing things, maybe it's not even an old way. Maybe it's just like for this moment in time, it's just not working. So say you're in menopause or perimenopause, it might be an old way. Say that you still have regular cycles, it might be something you did 2 weeks ago, just isn't working anymore. And you're just not sure how to replace them. You're just not sure what to do in these, in these more, in these moments. All right, so let's talk about why your body feels out of control with food. Let's talk about these reasons. Okay, so the first reason is your body needs more fuel. It needs more energy, and it lets you know it in a really aggressive way. Okay, here's what this looks like. Perhaps you eat the same time that you always do. You eat breakfast or something the same time you always do, but by mid-morning, you're hungry again. Or maybe you eat lunch and by 3 o'clock or even earlier, potentially like 1:30, 2 p.m., you are wandering into the kitchen thinking, why am I thinking about food already? You finish dinner and you want more. And potentially you might even have true, real physiological hunger. And you think this is too much. I shouldn't need this much food. But here's the truth, okay? Right before your period, and often during perimenopause, at unpredictable times, your body burns more energy. During hormonal fluctuations, your body burns more energy. And this happens even if your life didn't change, even if your routine and rhythms are exactly the same as they usually are. And so what I want you to think about is that what you're feeling in this moment or in this time period, it's not a loss of control. It's just an increased physiological need that we have to adapt to. And whether that's once a month because you're cycling every month, or whether it's more unpredictable because you're in a more perimenopause or menopause transition, the work now is adapting to this. Right? Your body is doing more work in these times behind the scenes. And so it truly might want more fuel, more energy to match it. Okay, this is a real thing. Reason number 2 is that waiting too long to eat, it hits harder than it used to. Okay, so during these hormonal fluctuational times, this is something that's very common. Okay, so say you skip lunch because you're busy, or you eat something small, maybe like an apple or a fruit or something, and you tell yourself it's enough, and maybe other parts of the month it is enough, or maybe in the past this worked for you. But for some reason, you're in a position now where an hour later, you feel shaky, you feel completely impatient, you're snapping at people, you suddenly are having this intense craving for sugar, for salt. So you just grab whatever is nearby maybe, and then you feel guilty or you feel mad at yourself or discouraged or something like that. But I want you to understand that during these hormonal fluctuations, and this is a scientific biological truth, blood sugar drops faster. Blood sugar drops faster because estrogen and insulin are intricately related. Okay, estrogen and insulin are intricately related. So your body doesn't tolerate gaps the way that it used to. Your body doesn't tolerate the gaps the way that it used to. And so these cravings or these emotional highs and lows, it doesn't mean that you are weak or that you're undisciplined or there's something wrong, there's something wrong with you mentally. It just means that your body just says, I need food sooner because of this, this correlation between estrogen and insulin. All right. So before I move on, I just want to remind you that if you are loving the podcast, we love when new people find our podcast. And the way that we can do that is by you who are listening to the podcast, leaving us a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, and leaving a review. And that way the algorithm is like, yes, these conversations are really important. And we are going to show this podcast to more people. So if you could do that, that'd be amazing. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to us there as well. You've built a good life. From the outside, it looks like you have it all together. You eat clean, you work hard, you take care of everyone. But there's this one area that still feels impossible to master, and that is food. You can eat perfectly all day and still end up in the kitchen at night wondering why you keep doing this. You promise yourself you'll start fresh tomorrow, and I know you mean it every single time. But the cycle, it always finds its way back, especially when you're stressed, when you're overwhelmed, or when you're just tired of being the one that's holding it all together. And I get it because I lived that way for years. And what I learned is this: the problem, it was never about food. It was the pressure underneath it, the perfectionism, the self-doubt, the part of me that never felt safe and secure to just be me. And that's why I created the sober eating sequence. It's a proven 3-phase method that rewires the emotional patterns and the belief systems driving overeating so you can relax, trust yourself around food, and release weight completely naturally, without force and without obsession. Because when your body feels secure, it lets go. The cravings quiet, the self-punishment, it softens, and food, it stops being the thing that you have to fix. This is not another plan. This isn't another rule book. It's a revolutionary transformation for your nervous system, for your body, and for your identity. So join the sober eating movement today. All right, reason number 3. So reason number 3 is that during these hormonal fluctuations, old food fears can get reactivated. Old food fear, old narratives can get reactivated. And this one is subtle, but it's really powerful. Okay, so you don't just feel hungrier during this time. And I hear this so often with women that I work with, people that I work with. You don't just feel hungrier, you feel more worried about it. You feel more worried about it. You notice yourself thinking, what if this keeps going, right? Because maybe you are eating more because of all the reasons we just said. But you notice yourself thinking, what if this keeps going? What if I gain weight? What if I can't get this back under control? The future fear forecasting. And therefore, you think something is wrong now. You think something is wrong now in this moment. But what's really happening is that hormonal shifts make this narrative, make this kind of this devil on your shoulder much louder, right? Make these psychological patterns and these thought patterns, the hormonal shifts make them louder. Things that you maybe have more capacity to push down or not really engage with as much emotionally, like, fear about weight, fear about appetite, fear about losing control. During these moments, during the month or in a stage of your life you're in, they don't stay buried as easily. Okay. And I think anyone who's listening to this will probably relate to the fact that food anxiety, it's not new. If you're listening to this podcast, I guarantee that you've experienced food anxiety at some point. It's just at this stage of the month or in your life, it's just closer to the surface. Okay. It's just closer to the surface. And so if these thoughts are coming up, right, I want you to see where in your hormonal cycle and where in your life cycle these thoughts are coming up, and think about this, right? Give yourself grace, thinking like, oh yeah, maybe it's the hormonal fluctuation that's causing this. Maybe I'm not regressing. You're not regressing, right? You're definitely not regressing. Your body just isn't numbing the old fear in this moment or potentially anymore, right? If you're, older, like, post 35, 40, and you're moving into that later phase of your relationship with your hormones. And so what happens is that fear always feels more raw and more dangerous when it's finally being felt. So a lot of times we suppress, but when things are finally in our, especially fear, when it's finally being acknowledged and brought to the surface and it's getting into our nervous system, it feels a lot more raw. All right. So the fourth reason is your body feels more sensitive. Your physical body feels more sensitive. So you try and control it. And let me give you an example of how this shows up. Okay. So an example of your body feeling more physically sensitive is you feel bloated after meals. Maybe your ring feels tight. Your clothes feel uncomfortable by the end of the day, right? Maybe by the middle of the day. Maybe they feel uncomfortable when you wake up in the morning, right? They feel uncomfortable. And you think to yourself, if I could just eat less, this would stop. So this is the whole, your body feels more physically sensitive. So you try to control it by thinking, if I could just eat less, this would stop. But when you do this, when you are, a couple days before your period, or when you're in, the transition and the perimenopause, menopause transition, here's the thing, your body is holding water differently. Your body is holding water differently. It actually could have absolutely nothing to do with fat or calories or energy or anything like that. Your body just holds water differently. So digestion can slow. Right? I know for myself, I definitely feel much more lethargic with my digestion when I'm ovulating or when I'm a couple days before my period comes. Fullness feels heavier. It just feels like sometimes, when I'm not in a place where my hormones are fluctuating as much, and I actually track my hormones with the Oura Ring. I don't know if anyone has that, but I have found that to be so helpful. And I see the correlation. When my hormones are not fluctuating, I could be full, but it doesn't feel like it's weighing me down. Whereas like in this part, when I do have hormones fluctuating, I could feel full and it feels like it's weighing me down. Right? My normal sensations just feel more intense. And so my level of discomfort increases. And, maybe I end up going back, or you as well end up going back to that, reason number 3, which is the old food fear gets reactivated. So all these things, we'll talk about this at the end, but all of these things truly do relate to each other. They relate to each other. And so the last reason, and this one is a little bit more specific to the perimenopause and the menopause population, is that your relationship with yourself is changing. And this one doesn't show up as hunger at first, right? This one doesn't show up as hunger at first. It shows up as tolerance changing, right? Your tolerance changes. Your patience changes. So things that you used to push through without thinking, whether that's being tired, being hungry, being uncomfortable, things that you just naturally kind of just autopilot, just turned on autopilot, cruise control, and just went on with your life. Your body doesn't just let you cruise anymore. Your body's just not letting you cruise control anymore. And you notice yourself pushing back. You notice yourself thinking things like, I don't want to be hungry right now. I don't want to wait. I don't want to power through this experience, this feeling, etc. And so instead of just shoving that, that voice down, you don't, right? You don't. So you eat, you snack, you say yes to food sooner. And because you probably, again, if you're listening to this, you spent years correlating self-control with self-virtue, right? You thought discipline and self-control was this virtuous thing. This feels really scary, right? This feels really scary. You think to yourself, why am I not as disciplined as I used to be? Why can't I just say no to myself anymore? This definitely happens, but here's what's happening. Here's what's actually happening. This is key. During this time of life, during perimenopause and menopause, a lot of women stop overriding themselves. And this is not just with food. It's with relationships. It's with, it's with a lot of stuff. It's with their purpose. It's with a lot of things. We get to this stage of our lives and the fluctuating hormones, they kind of just strip the mask a lot quicker, and we stop overriding ourselves. We're less willing to just to stay hungry, just to prove something or whatever. We're less willing to ignore our body, right? Our emotions. We're less likely to tolerate discomfort, right? We're just less likely to put up with things that are not making us feel good. We're less willing to do that. And the goal is to, of course, that's actually great, right? It's great to be authentic and to be more authentic to ourselves, but we don't want to feel guilty about that. We don't want to feel bad about that, right? We want to develop skills that allow us to elevate into that identity. But when that hasn't happened yet, food can often become the place where this new shift shows up, right? We end up going to food. We end up going to food to, as a reward or as a soothing, or, we end up going to food in that way. And, this isn't really food chaos per se. It's just your body saying, I'm not willing to ignore my truth, to ignore my authentic lived experience. Okay. And this is where this is coming from. And so when the self override ends, things can feel messy before they feel steady. Things can feel messy in this time before they feel steady, and you have developed the skills to be in this new place without needing to turn to food. Because at the end of the day, the food isn't the problem. You're just using it as a way to feel grounded. Okay. So what do all of these reasons have in common? When food feels harder to manage during hormonal shifts, regardless of where you are in your life cycle, it usually shows up like this. Okay. You don't get a gentle, like, I'm hungry anymore. Right? You don't really get whether it's, and I know you felt this when it's a couple days before your period or during this time, you don't get a just oh, I'm hungry. It's almost like you go from A to Z. You go from 0 to 60. You go from fine to I'm really not fine really quickly. Maybe you try to push through stress the way that you do in other areas, in other times of the month or in other times of your life. You try to power through and finish the task. You try to suppress a stressful emotion, and your body just says no, right? Your body says no. And maybe you tell yourself that you'll eat after this meeting or you'll eat later, you keep pushing it off, and your body responds with a true physiological response like shakiness, irritation. And a lot of times what happens is you get the food noise, you get the tunnel vision around food, you get urgency. And the thing that I think is the most frustrating for a lot of people is that the tools that you used to go to, the toolbox you used to go to in the past, or, the tools that you think would be the easiest and the lowest hanging fruit, they don't work, right? Skipping meals doesn't work. Eating super light or whatever doesn't work. Over exercising, none of this works, right? Your body doesn't really acquiesce to this anymore. Okay. So, what your body is asking for truly at the end of the day is it wants you to learn how to respond to it in the moment, building those anchors of how you can respond to your body in the moment and be willing to ride out this moment with your body without needing to abuse food or use food as a means of control. So here is the part that I want to leave you with. Okay, if food feels harder to manage in these times during hormonal fluctuations, whether it's a few days before your period or certain weeks feel unpredictable, your cycle is maybe changing or it's gone, that doesn't mean that you're losing control. It just means that your body is no longer willing to be overridden. Okay, it's no longer willing to stay hungry, to follow a rule, to, ignore discomfort, to, prove that you have discipline, right? You're no longer willing to do that, or to push through things and suppress things just because you used to. Okay. So I really want you to understand that from moving from how am I going to go from what I used to do to what I do now can feel scary, because the questions that can arise are, why can't I just handle this the way that I used to? Or why does food feel louder during this time? Or why do I need more than I do usually? But needing more isn't, there's nothing wrong with needing more. It's actually just a really honest, authentic need and desire. And it's biological also, right? It's biological. Okay. So it's really important that we recognize that this is what's happening, right? These are the reasons why you might feel out of control, but it rarely has anything to do with you or food, right? You're not losing control at all. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just that your body is saying, I'm here, right? It's speaking louder. The volume has been turned up on your body's needs, and it just wants you to be with it. It wants you to adapt. And when you learn those things, and when you create this collaborative pattern and relationship with your body, eating stops feeling like an issue. Food stops feeling like a problem. And, you actually can ride the waves of these hormonal fluctuations and continue to feel like it's not pulling you out of your center. You're not feeling ungrounded. Okay. It's something that 100% can happen. And yes, is it uncomfortable, but it doesn't feel like something that is driving the car, right? You're the one that's still driving the car, but maybe the road's a little bumpy, but you're good because you're driving. All right. So that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your presence, for your participation. And speaking of participation, if you would like to ask us a question or comment so that we can create more episodes around what you really want to hear about, you can leave us a voice note in SpeakPipe, and that link is in the show notes. Also, we take those questions and those anonymous questions, and we use them for our Q&A episodes. So if you ever want to have one of your questions be answered by me, you can go ahead and click that link and leave us an anonymous question. We'll never say your name. We'll just answer your question. So if that sounds exciting to you, then go ahead and do that. And until next time, I'm Alana, and thank you for listening to Emotional Eating Unwrapped.